You have to walk the talk. You have to be authentic as a leader. If you're not doing it, they see that.
It is entirely universal. There's other people who are going through this.
For me, a great leader needs to be able to marry three things: vision, systems, and people.
Welcome to Leadership Moments if this is your first time, and if you are returning, thank you for your support.
This show is about leaders from all walks of life, leadership tips, and maybe even a little of what you wouldn't expect to help you in leadership.
We would appreciate it if you tell someone else about our podcast as we strive to support all leaders that want to just be better.
Let's get on with the show. Hey everyone, great to have you all with us here today for Leadership Moments podcast. I am very excited to introduce Carla Fowler, MD, PhD, founder and managing director of Thaxa. She is an elite executive coach, and her main focus is on leveraging the best ideas from performance science to help level leaders around the globe pursue ambitious goals and achieve greater success. I'm just thrilled to have you with us. She's really been a secret weapon for scores of CEOs and entrepreneurs and other senior leaders. She has a really unique approach which combines the latest research from performance science with timeless best practices to help top performers level up and achieve their goals. So with no further ado, I would like to welcome Carla onto our podcast today. Hey, Carla, it's so great to have you on the show today. I'm so excited for this topic.
Oh, thank you, Tracy Ann. This is going to be great. I love what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. And it's just, I know it's a topic that I'm certainly very interested in from a leadership perspective. But more importantly, I know our audience is going to really appreciate this. So I'm going to just dive right in.
That sounds awesome.
So, your background has been in both medicine and science, which is extraordinary. You're probably right up, here on that IQ chart, which is not where I belong. But what really made you pivot towards performance coaching?
Yeah, this is a great question. And of course, I did not start out knowing that this is where I was going to end up. And I like to always say that out loud because I think sometimes we can look at someone else's career path and say, oh, they had it all planned out, or but a lot of things happen organically for us. So I think one of the sort of big things that you have to think about as you go along in your career, and certainly I was you have a dream, you have an idea about what something's going to be like, and you go after it. And sometimes you put in a lot of work. I put in 10 years of training and then went off to my surgical residency. And all along the way, with the training, I actually enjoyed quite a bit of it. Certainly there are sleepless nights, there are hard moments. It's not that everything was enjoyable, but I found it very interesting. I was learning. I was getting to work with interesting people. I was being challenged. And so I could just see myself growing. And ultimately, so I started my residency program at Stanford University and was doing general surgery. And it is an interesting moment because sometimes you will hit a point in your career when you suddenly are like, okay, this is what it actually is. These will be the daily activities. This will be the culture of the place that I am working in. And how do I actually feel doing it? And of course, there's usually a mix of feelings. So for me, I really liked working with patients. There were a lot of hard conversations. There were also some happy conversations, but I found that I had a lot of skill. I really enjoyed that. And the reason I had ultimately gone into a patient-facing specialty, or why I had chosen that, was because I thought I would like that. And that absolutely bore out. I also had really intelligent people that I got to work with. That was important to me. That was true. I think some of the elements of what it looks like to work in the healthcare system with all the pressures it has and what that kind of enforces on a culture of a place were things that I did not like so much. I think also I noticed that there were skills and strengths that I had that were not getting used as much as I really would have liked them to. It's like when you feel okay, I'm using the really gritty part of myself that knows how to work really hard and put your head down and just do it and run from thing to thing to thing. But I'm not using as much of the curious part of me, or the part of me that when you have a little more time can really like optimize or really elevate the performance of something. And I think a big thing that I realized in that year was that I have always been super performance minded. I mean, that's part of how you end up in a general surgery program, but that I was always looking for ways to make things better. And it felt like the system was constrained enough that there wasn't actually going to be a lot of opportunity to do that. And it kind of alerted me to the fact that I was like, Carla, what you really love is performance. Performance is what you are thinking about all the time. And you're looking at the performance of a human system. You're looking at the culture of a place. And I wasn't a person who grew up thinking, I want to be a doctor. That's the thing I have to do. And so I think, I had to make a hard choice at the end of that year, which was like, do you want to keep doing this, knowing that you can already see where it takes you? And you sort of have an inkling that that's not where you want to go. And that was a very inconvenient moment and choice, but I couldn't really unsee it. And I think one strength I have is the willingness to say, well, that really sucks. But also, I just have to move forward with the information I have now and also take all the things. I didn't regret any of the things I had done, and I had learned so much, but I need to repackage things in a new way. And the theme I'm going to package that around is performance, because it's clear to me that has been the common thread, whether it was athletics, whether it was all this academic training, that was like the common theme. And so, it was really hard. And so, I let my program know I would leave and they should fill my spot. Like I gave them some notice so they could fill it. And I left and opened a practice doing executive coaching using performance science. So again, that one-on-one interactions with people, getting to use some of the things I loved in medicine, but in a really different way around a different topic. And so that's sort of the story of like, without planning it ahead of time, how one makes that jump.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating though, because I think, I think a lot of people, what you're talking about, a lot of people actually go through, I think, in their career journey. What's interesting about this is for anyone, looking from the outside in, they'd be like, Carla, what are you doing? You're going to Stanford. You've spent the last 10 years, but what I really admire, and certainly for our audience, what I really respect is when you know that the things that you want to do and the things that you're most passionate about are not what you're going to get to do, you are willing to change or pivot, take the experience. You'll never regret it, as you said, but you take what you've learned and you pivot. And a lot of people, interesting enough, don't do that. They get sort of stuck in their career and they're like, well, this is where I'm going to go and I'm going to keep doing it. But when you realize, I think you said something that I really appreciate. I couldn't unsee it. And how many times do people see, but yet don't activate on that, that epiphany, let's call it, right? Whereas you had the courage to say, no, I know what I want out of my life and this isn't it. And so I'm going to take what I've learned and I'm going to pivot, which I really, really, really respect. Now I want to talk to you about this, this concept of this performance science. What exactly is it and how do you apply it in your work with your clients?
So in performance science, here's how I think about it. Number one, it's multidisciplinary. Like you could think of it as all the ideas and the thinkers who are working on this idea of what helps human beings do their best work or what helps them create their best results towards the things that they're working after, like the goals they set or the challenges that they've put themselves up against. And it's multidisciplinary. So it's not the same as like, oh, it's just chemistry or it's just this or it's just that. So a lot of different things go into performance. And so the first thing I did when I started a practice was I said, I need to break this down because if I want to think about this as a practitioner, not as an academic, I actually need to have a holistic ability to say to someone, here's some of the things we're thinking about when we're talking about performance. And here's how we can actually use performance science and kind of bucket it in some ways so that we can actually say, when you're up against a challenge, or when a client comes in and they say, Carla, I really want to raise my performance or my results about X, Y, or Z, that I have a way to say, okay, we have a few different angles of approach. So I'm talking about it not from an academic standpoint. And I think this is really important because there are people who approach it more as a splitter versus a lumper, for example. In academics, we part of how you make your name for yourself is you narrow and you get into that like niche where you can be the foremost expert of the thing. Now, I work with clients who are coming in and have all sorts of different kinds of things that they are working on, both the industry they're in, but also for them personally, what it would look like to raise their results. And so as a practitioner, I have to think about it like a little more holistically. So the buckets that I break it down into are to say, all right, you've got a lot of thinkers and ideas and tools around the idea of strategy, or to say, when you have a goal, when you're going after something, number one, you have to have some clarity about what exactly is it you're going after, but also what is most important that is going to impact your ability to go get that. Not what are all the things you can do. Strategy is about, okay, what are all the things you're not going to do so that you can make a few things successful? And that's your bet about what's going to get you there. So you have a strategy bucket. Now, if you've decided what are the most important things for you to do, you also have an execution bucket, which is you have to go do those things, or you have to help lead your team to go do those things. Rarely is it a single player game. So usually there's a team or company or an organization involved. And there are, based on how our brains work, how we work as human systems, they're just better ways to execute, more effective or more efficient. And there are ways that are less so. And so there's a bucket in performance. For example, the productivity movement. You could say lives, like the fact that that exists, all the ideas there kind of lives in that execution bucket. Okay. Then you've got third bucket is kind of the bucket around psychology or the mindset that goes into performance. So, using an athletics example, at some point it became clear that like, as we were training for athletics, it mattered not just like what your training was or how physically strong you were, but like whether or not you believed you could win, how you dealt with hardship. Like if you get a cramp halfway through the race, like what do you do at that point? Is your brain freaking out, or do you run a process to say, well, when I get a cramp, this is what I do to breathe through it. This is what I focus on, So there's a whole bunch of psychology around not just for ourselves, but also like, how do you motivate a team as a leader? How do you build confidence in yourself or in someone else? So that's sort of some of the psychology. And then the last bucket is this idea of our physiology, because it turns out our brains and our bodies are not separate. And our physiology matters not just in athletic performance, but absolutely impacts like how we're feeling, whether we're like super jacked up on adrenaline, for example, has a big impact on our decision-making as a leader, or our ability to connect with another person. So how much sleep we've gotten recently, like have we eaten something recently, have we gotten to move or exercise? Our physiology matters to our performance, even when we're in kind of a thought performance field. So this as a practitioner is how I think about performance science. And I love this angle because it means that performance isn't this thing that is like, we have to work magic or there's some dark secret about how we improve it. It kind of breaks it down and says, no, we've got multiple angles of approach if you are going after something challenging and you want to raise your results. And we can like work through each of those angles. So that's how I think about it.
Yeah, that's great. That's really good. There's some big nuggets in there for our audience. Gosh, I think they're going to have to listen to this a few times because there's some, those big four buckets. There's a lot packed in there. But the one thing I love is multidisciplinary. That to me is the key word. It's not single faceted. right? Which is really, really, really critical. Now, I have another question for you. So, what are some of the biggest misconceptions around peak performance?
Yes, I love this question because I have been geeking out about performance long before I became a coach, actually. But I think one of the biggest misconceptions that I see, and it gets propagated on social media, and because there are so many ideas about performance out there now, one of the challenges is it starts to create a misconception that what we need to find is like the right hack or the right shortcut or the right tool. We get it in our minds that, oh, I'm just missing the key piece. And if I just had that, then my performance, I could elevate it. And what happens is we get distracted and like looking for that special tool rather than saying, all right, I might already know about 5 good and reasonable tools that would elevate my performance, but what they require is that I get started on them and I do them somewhat consistently and I practice and I get better at them. And this is like the most common misperception that I see. And it is both a benefit and a challenge to know about this misconception. Number one, I'm destroying a dream for some people.
Totally.
Okay. On the other hand, I always hope when I share this point that I'm opening a door to people to say, you are not out of the club. There is not a secret club that understands something about performance that you don't. I'm not trying to say at all that one should not learn, that one can't go out and like read a book about something that you want to improve at. Absolutely recommend that. Or don't even read a book. Go to ChatGPT, ask for some best practices. The AI systems are flawed, but can be useful. So it's not about not learning something new. It's about the character of the thing we're looking for and our willingness to like get into action. So that I would say is the number one misconception that I see.
That's really good. I'd never thought about it in that way, actually. So you kind of gave me a new way of thinking about it, which is really interesting. Now, in your experience, what differentiates someone who continues to be a high performer, let's say, as opposed to someone who has burnout?
Oh, yeah. And this, I mean, particularly, I think COVID running into like some of the times we're in now, the number of people who are feeling burnt out, like if someone in the audience is feeling that, you are not alone. And so it's a very apt question for right now, Tracy Ann. And I think there's about like 3 or 4 things that I see commonly that are important. I think one of the most important, and this is like a principle that kind of falls out of that strategy bucket, just to reference something we were talking about before. I think one of the most important things is this idea of focus. It's the ability to say, there's sort of 2 pieces of focus. There is the, what is it I want? Because some of what can create burnout is when we are saying, I want about 10 different things and they are all in different directions and I haven't been able to prioritize all those things. That's whether that's personally, whether that's like for your company. That's one of the things that create burnout because we simply don't have the time or resources to successfully go after all of those things. Then the second piece of focus is even if you like narrowed and you said, okay, these are the key objectives or goals that I want to go after. The next step we have to do with brutal focus is say, what is actually most important to be going after those things? Not what is everyone else doing? What are all the things I could do? I mean, these are steps along the way. So it's totally okay to make a list of everything you might think is important. Also okay to make a list of what everyone else is doing. Like sometimes that's a very useful resource. But to give a concrete example, when I was starting my practice, I had just pivoted out of surgery. No one teaches you how to run a business in medical school. So I have lots of smarts, yes, but also like no smarts like yet in the area that I most need to work in. And one of the things that I think was very helpful but hard to do was I forced myself to focus. I mean, there was so much to learn, everything from social media to do I need to write a book, to how do I need to sell, to how to get my first clients, to what kind of frameworks and materials do I need, just so many things. And I was getting a ton of advice also from different people. And I decided, and it was hard because lots of people were saying, well, you should do this, you should do this. And I was like, I'm going to focus on two things. Number one, I need to make sure the coaching is like top notch. Because when someone, if like that, the moment I get my first client, I need them to have a fabulous experience, have it be very impactful for them. And the second thing was I need to learn how to sell. Like there are many ways to do marketing and all of these complex different things or social media, but the most important thing is I need to bring in clients. And so for the first 10 years, I'd focused really on those two things. I did no social media. I did not write a book. There was not a blog. I just networked. I went out and built relationships. I read books on how to sell. I practiced. And I can promise you my pitch was not great for at least the first 200 reps. When someone would literally just ask me, what do you do, Carla? What is it you do? Oh, you're a doctor. No. Oh, okay. You're not actually. That's not what you're doing. And I will say it is difficult to do, but it meant that I was constantly targeting my efforts and resources towards the things that were going to be like the pillars of what needed to happen. And I think it definitely saved me some time in the long run, but requires and also like prevented burnout. I wasn't, trying to do a ton of different things. So I think that focus is one of the most important things. One second thing I'll just say is don't ignore your biology. So burnout comes from different places. Some of it is, are you seeing the ROI of your efforts? And that's where I think focus really helps. But the other thing is just literally, how are you physically feeling? And so I think the other thing I did during those first 10 years was I focused on, after not having gotten a lot of sleep for probably the previous 3 years, I made sure I got enough sleep. It's really difficult to get up every day. And I'm guessing members of your audience can resonate with this. If you're building something or if you're pivoting, like that uncertainty is really challenging. And like our brains need more time to recover. So things like sleep are really important. Things like moving your body, getting outside, like just kind of caring for the health of yourself. Also like, your relationships, your support system. These are things that are hard sometimes to tangibly connect to, let's say, that work or that career challenge that you're up against, but really, really matter in our ability and our resilience to handle that uncertainty. So I think I would say that's a second big one.
No, I actually really, really appreciate that because I changed my patterns over the last 12 months where I wanted to start getting up earlier. And this is when I was writing my book. I wanted to get up earlier. But in order to do that, and again, to your point, I was pivoting. And in order to do that, I was in bed at 6:30, 7 o'clock at night. People thought I was crazy. But I had to change my patterns, my behavior, because I know my energy is always high in the morning. And when you're writing something, you can have zero distractions, right? So I'm just validating your point that, yes, I mean, those are two really, really important things. And I love your point about the focus, because I do agree. You're spread too thin, you've got too many irons in the fire. It's burnout. It's just burnout. That's it.
Like making some of those changes, particularly ones that are like socially out of the flow of things, is really difficult. And so I was just going to say, good on you for, and I can resonate. There have been times when I've gone to bed at like 7 p.m. because I get up at 5. And if it's been an extra, exerting period of time, sometimes I just know that like my mood, like my creativity, my brain power, it took me 3 months actually after leaving residency to have a creative, original thought again, a thought that wasn't, well, I have to do this, or an anxious thought, or it took a while for my brain to start being curious about things and creative. So fact that you were writing your book, you were like, I need more sleep and I need to get up early so that there aren't distractions and I can really do this when my energy is best. Difficult habits to change, but doable. And I love it that you are just an example to your audience of like, you can do this. It's possible.
Something else you just brought up, which I just want to expand on for a second. You mentioned this word creativity, and it's very interesting to me because I believe that when you're doing what you love, you are more creative. And you had come from, as you said, it was decompression, or it was a pivot, or whatever that was. It took you sort of 3 months to get back into your creative streak. I got to tell you, Carla, I had the same experience when I did that pivot. And that's kind of fascinating to me because to you were going from something that you had not hated, but not loved, right? There were components of it that were really amazing and some components you weren't so crazy about. But now when you go back and you think about all that you moved to and how you took what you had learned, but you embedded into this new you, the CEO of FAXA, you're doing your coaching, and now all of a sudden your creativity's there. And I just ponder on that for a second with our audience to say, have you lost your creativity because you're not fulfilling your passion, potentially? Or find a way to get your creativity, because sometimes that does happen to us where we lose that creativity. And it's such an incredible moment when you get your creativity back. Didn't you feel that?
Yes. And for me, it wasn't like there definitely wasn't a light switch. So just to reassure audience, just like,
totally.
Don't worry. If it's not a light switch that like flips on, don't worry. It hasn't passed you by. It's just sometimes it can be a little bit of a slower awakening. But I think what you said is so true, that it can be about like what you're passionate about. It also can be simply like an energy thing. So I think creativity takes extra energy. So for example, if you are burned out, that can be another thing that can get in the way of that creativity. But I do think it is an interesting little flag. It's just not to make, this is not a crisis for anyone, but I think it's a useful tool, piece of data to say, how creative are you feeling? And it doesn't necessarily signal like, is something wrong, or what exactly is wrong if something is wrong or something is not ideal. Again, this is not a crisis moment, but I think it is interesting to ask the question, because often there may be ways we could increase what creativity we feel that we can express without leaving a job at all. But it requires that we put some focus on it. And yes, sometimes you need to leave the job, but sometimes it takes knowing, like getting some time to think about it. Notice first, that's where we just talk about, that's an interesting little flag. Just ask yourself. And then there might be some conversations you could have with other people if you've identified like, yeah, I'm feeling less creative, but I see, you can look around and say, what sparks something for me? Is there a project or a particular endeavor that's happening that gives me more of this moment? Like I have a client who like definitely has identified this area of their work. And even though like as a CEO, like it, they might not be needed in that effort, but it's part of what makes them excited. And so they have allocated some time knowing what the purpose of it is for them. And that other people know that as well, But I just get that as an example of, we need some of that. And yes, not all of work is going to be our most creative moment. And that's okay too. It's okay to have some balance or some things that you just got to do because you have to do them. And that's part of life.
Yeah. And I really appreciate what you said. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with your job, because actually I loved my job. Absolutely loved it. But it used up a lot of my time prevented me from perhaps doing some creative things and outlets. And then I moved to some outlets that, because I had more time. So to your point, there's nothing wrong with anybody. You don't have to leave your job. It's not about that. But it does make you happy when you have some creativity in your life. And so that's really the question. Like, if you don't, it requires energy, as you said. So how do you try and get there? So I have another question for you. What role does mindset play in performance?
Yes, I love it. So third bucket of performance science. I think it is very important, and I think we're still learning about it. So what's interesting about mindset is that it is one of those things that has been shown to be a little more like you can flip a switch and something really changes for someone. Now, that's different from, it's not that if my mind, let's use an example, like as I'm starting my practice, right? Like it's not that if my mindset around selling, and because I'll tell you, like it was totally intimidating. You go out and you feel like, do people really see you in this new role? Did they like what you had to offer? It's a very, like, you are exposing yourself to a lot of potential external judgment, but certainly for me, a lot of self-judgment, right? That pitch was not very smooth. So mindset is interesting because we are learning that it's one of those things that when you change it, it may very much change my performance in the moment. So my level of confidence. It doesn't mean that it changes, like I suddenly have 10 clients lined up. I still have to go do the work of it. So in that sense, it is not a silver bullet. It's not, I don't really put it in the same category as like a hack or something like that. But that when we can frame what is our approach to something, why does it matter to us? And when we change how we think about it, it can actually have very powerful impacts on how we show up to other people. For example, there were really interesting studies done about mindset around belonging at universities for students. And again, this is just a subset of experiments, but where they ran programs to try and help people have a little more of a mindset of I belong here, and what they were able to show is like people who had that mindset shift and were able to share it with someone else and go through some different elements were more likely to stay, were more likely to be successful. And so we know that mindset it's difficult to measure. And this is one of the things about anything that is sort of psychological or sociological, harder to measure, but a lot of potential in that area. And so I think mindset's very important. But again, it comes in combo. Often what I find mindset helps us do is it helps us really show up differently in a moment, potentially show up differently in our willingness to put in the work and stack up that time that really produces those results. It also changes maybe just how comfortable we feel or how open we feel.
Okay, so a couple more questions, and then we're going to get to some lightning round, fast, fun questions. Okay, so if you could go back to the start of your career, is there anything that you would do differently?
This is such a hard question for me. I obviously have moments where I'm like, that was like, why did you do that thing? Right. But they tend to be, I'm just going to say they're micro moments, right? Where you're like, I said that really dumb thing to that, you know, in that interview. I can't believe I said that thing. Right. So I have the normal smattering of those things. And yet this question challenges me because there are plenty of hindsight things like, well, Carla, if you realized you didn't want to be a doctor, then like you could have, you know, done something totally different. You could have gone right into this. Maybe you would have done whatever, a PhD in performance science or something like this, right? So it's very easy to say that. And yet as I said earlier in the podcast, I'm a firm believer that there aren't shortcuts and that you don't always know the value of everything that you've kind of picked up or learned along the way. And I think part of what I would consider to be like my unique signature today has everything to do with the path that I've walked. And I try to always like examine and remember and pull out like, oh yeah, like that thing I learned while I was doing like cancer research, like at a bench, which on the surface would seem like it has nothing to do with what I do now. And yet, for example, my PhD advisor, like I went into his office and he was like, yeah, okay, I hear that you could do all those experiments, but why? What is the important question you're answering? I still remember this piece of advice because it is very relevant to everything I do today. His point was like, there's lots of stuff you can do, but you got to ask yourself, like, why is this valuable? Why would it be valuable to me? Why might it be valuable to other people? What are the most useful questions to ask? And this is a technique, like I help my clients do it. I think about it for my own business. I think about it for myself, my own development. And that's not a nugget you can plan. That's not a nugget you can go back in your career and say, well, I'm just going to line up all my peak experiences and do them one after another. And we laugh, but I bring this up because I think like there are always things we can look at in our careers or in our lives where like, well, that could have been better. But it can be really important to also re-examine it and say, well, what did I get out of that? What did I learn? Because it's very easy to see the bad, but not see like the good we got from something, or to know that we might be much more one-dimensional if we got to take this perfect path like directly to a place. So hard question for me, but I think I wouldn't change anything only because I don't know what the second order effects of changing it would be.
Yeah.
And yeah.
No, that's I think that's pretty profound actually for many of us, to be honest. So one last question before we get to the fun. For our audience, and I'm going to frame it up in two ways. What advice would you have for our audience to help them level up? Or what is one question that you think that they should be asking themselves? And whichever way you want to answer that.
Yeah, no. Okay. That's a great way to put it. I think one of the most powerful questions, because I think we all, like, it's part of being human to say, I want to do better. Not because there's anything wrong with us as we are, but because I think we are growing human beings. And I think we thrive more when we're growing. And this is both when we're in our 20s and it's also when we're in our 70s or 80s, like that's part of the thriving in life. And so I would recommend asking the question, like, what do I already know to do that would help me towards some goal I have or some growth that would be good for me? What do I already know to do that I am avoiding or discounting? Versus, rather than avoiding or discounting, saying, and how do I go start doing that work? How can I just get started on it? So asking, like, what's that thing? Because many of us may have that thing already lodged in our brain. You already know what it is. Or certainly with some thought, 10 minutes of thought with a piece of paper, you could identify both what's the thing that's nagging you that you'd like to grow at, and what's one thing you already know you could do.
Yeah, that's very good. Okay, so there's that sound, which means it's now time for some fun questions. So first one, what's one book that changed your life?
So I like to read. I read a lot about performance science. So this is always a hard question for me also. But I think the book that I'm going to choose for this answer just has a lot of relevance for right now, and I think will be helpful. And that is The Upside of Stress by Kelly McGonigal. And in it, she talks a lot about mindsets. So there's great information about the power of mindsets in there, but particularly around our mindset about stress, because I think many people are feeling very stressed right now. And that combined with the idea that, like, oh, but stress is bad for us. So this is doubly bad, right? Creates even more stress. And in the book, she really artfully lays out the science, but also some methodologies around saying, no, like stress is actually the sign that there's something we care about at stake. And when we can reframe our stress in that way, our stress is in fact not bad for us and actually opens a lot of different doors and ways to connect with people and thrive with stress. So I think it's just, it's a book that I've certainly used and thought about a lot over time, and I think it's particularly appropriate to the moment.
Yeah, I love that. I've actually never read it, so I'm gonna get that book. That sounds really good, actually. Second question: what is one daily ritual you never skip?
Oh, well, not to like beat this one into the ground, but it's I sleep. It is rare that I and if I have to go to bed late, I often will try and arrange to sleep more. But the probably more exciting one is I love being outdoors. I love exercising, and I just think it's the thing that delights me. So I try to never miss.
That's wonderful. That's so good. All right. Best advice you have ever received?
There's lots of different pieces of advice, and I tend to be a collector. So of advice, as opposed to like there was one piece of advice and I just followed it. But my memory is, particularly for where my life path is now, about 3 months into my residency program, I was already kind of starting to notice like, oh, okay, this is how things work here. And, but you're still kind of ramping up into it. There was a surgeon who, was a very kind person, a little bit quieter, but we were in the workroom and he was like, "What's your plan?" And I was like, well, I think I'm going to become a transplant surgeon because I did all this research and, immune tolerance and blah, blah, blah. And he was like, no, I mean, like, what's your plan to like leave? And I was like, at this moment, you're like, is this a test? Are you testing my loyalty? But he was like, no, I mean, he's like, I'm working to do an app, and so I can like make, have some different kinds of financial flexibility so I can operate when and where I want to, and just not be so much like kind of at the beck and call of this as a system. And I remember just being like, oh no, like this is very bad. Like, so someone I respect has confirmed that this may not be the dream. This might not be everything I thought it would be. And so I didn't say any of this, but in my mind, I'm just thinking, oh no, this is not good. But probably good that I heard that from someone I respected. And that probably had a big impact on then as months went on and nothing sort of changed for me, that I made a different decision for my life. And 13 years later, here we are.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing? That's amazing. And the fact that you even recognized it at that point in time, right? 3 months in, you're like, does everyone know? Does everyone know? That's really fantastic. Well, Carla, it's just been such a treat having you on the show, such a wealth of information. And I know that our audience valued, learning more about performance science. I know I certainly did. And we'll definitely have you, here on the show again.
Oh, thank you, Tracy Ann.
A year from now, we'll bring you back and, we'll touch the subject. We'll probably know a lot more because, nothing ever stays the same. But it's really been great having you on the show. So thank you for being with us.
Oh, thank you so much for those words, Tracy Ann. And this was a great conversation. I loved your questions and really fun to be here.
Good. Awesome. Wonderful. So from leadershipmomentspodcast.com, thank you very much. Please send us any of your questions or anything you want to know about, and we'll make sure that we feed that into our channels. So thanks for being with us today, everyone. If you enjoyed the show, please go to leadershipmomentspodcast.com to subscribe to the podcast or on your favorite player, as well as follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn.
You can also send us a message on what you like and don't like, or what guest you want us to have on the show.
So until next time,
this is Stacey Castor, and what doesn't challenge you won't change you.
And I'm Tracy Ann Palmer. Be the change you wish to see in the world.